Ah, the US government.
I was in the the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping.
Like most modern governments, America's government is widely distrusted by its people. This is for many reasons, most of which would single-handedly cause the next civil war in my comments section. But there is one universal hatred most of us share towards the US government, and that is, they're spying on us. Them commie Nazi politicians are putting them bugs or what you call it's in everything. They could be listening now. Don't trust them. Yes, we've all heard it before. The government is spying on us. And whilst yes, we can't really prove that it's the government per se that is in fact spying on us, we can be left with no doubt there is one thing the government is spying on, and that being other countries. Now, there are many ways to spy on another country. You could perhaps place foreign agents in said country and spy on them in that way. No, not your thing? Okay, what about spy balloons? No, too old for your tastes? Satellites then? No, too expensive. Well, then what is the solution? Surely there must be something easier. Okay, what about spy ships? Yes, they exist. There have been many famous spy ships. For example, the USS Pablo, a US spy ship that was fatefully sailing off one North Korea when the North Koreans themselves stumbled upon the ship. Presumably searching the ship for food, the North Koreans took the ship's crew hostage. Not finding any food, the North Koreans proceeded to then send the crew back to America several months later after they had determined that cannibalism wasn't worth it. The USS Pablo, however, was placed on display in a North Korean museum. To see the impressive American warship, pride of the US Navy USS Pablo, one simply needed to cede all their belongings to the North Korean government and say 50 prayers to Kim Il-sung, creator of the great North Korean Empire. Another less known but very important spy ship was the USS Liberty, which is why you clicked on this video, so let's get into it. Like the USS Pablo, USS Liberty did not start out with the name USS Liberty. Instead, the USS Liberty was laid down and commissioned under the name of USS Simmons Victory. Liberty also did not start out as a spy ship. Instead, Simmons Victory was a cargo ship. Laid down in February of 1945, Simmons Victory saw action in World War II as well as the Korean War. In 1962, Simmons Victory was converted into a spy ship and renamed to the USS Liberty. Liberty was 456 feet long, a beam of 62 feet, displacing 7,725 tons, speed of 17.5 knots, and a range of 12,500 nautical miles. Liberty also was not unarmed, as she came equipped with 4 M2 Browning machine guns. Now, the M2 Browning is an excellent weapon, and it's probably the most famous machine gun of all time. A reliable weapon that helps stop the Nazis, the North Koreans, the Viet Cong, and ISIS, just to name a few. And whilst yes, it is very well suited for warfare against infantry, it is poor in a role against, say, aircraft and boats, which you will soon come to find out. This means that yes, the Liberty was armed and defended, however it was poorly so and would be least suited in a fight against, shall I say, an armed attempt on her life by a foreign power of less than 2 fighter jets and a couple of fishing boats equipped with the latest and greatest Coral Reef Maker 9000s. But before we cover an incident, we must set the scene. The year is 1967, the month is June, and the day is June 5th. On this fateful day, the nations of Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia attacked Israel. These nations consisted of the Arab coalition, which, quite frankly, were tired of Israel and decided the best course of action was war. And thus began the 6-Day War. 6 days because, well, spoiler alert, Israel handed all 5 nations a main course of their own butts with a side of mess around and find out. With the USSR providing aid to the Arab coalition themselves no doubt expected a short and decideful victory. This is, as I stated before, not what they received. Now, the incident we're going to go over today did not in fact happen until the 3rd day of the war, on June 8th. During this day, the USS Liberty was sailing 20 miles northwest of El Arish, which was a small coastal town under recent bombardment at the time. Now, let's talk about the USS Liberty. Liberty had just arrived only a day prior. Now, Liberty was, at the time, in contact with the US 6th Fleet, which had advised Liberty to be on high alert. So, with this severe caution, the USS Liberty arrived on site a day prior to her fateful June 8th attack. In the hours after her arrival, Liberty's crew conducted several general quarters drills. The captain of the ship, William L. McGonigal, emphasized the importance of caution and alertness in their current situation. He furthered this point by pointing out the nearby city of El-Amish, which had been under recent bombardment. Unbeknownst to the Liberty and her crew, she was being watched. Not by the US, but also by Israel, who had in fact noticed and accurately identified the ship beforehand. But due to circumstances known only to God, Israeli protocol ensured that the Liberty was soon deemed of little importance and was quickly removed from whatever board Israel was using to track the war. This mess-up resulted in the dispatching of 2 Mirage 3 fighter jets to investigate the ship. Finding no identifying signs, the ship was quoted to perhaps be the Egyptian ship El Quasar, which looked similar but not similar to the Liberty if you catch my drift. See, like the Liberty, El Quasar maintained a similar appearance. Unlike the Liberty, El Quasar was smaller, featured different key features, and had several weapons that would enable coastal bombardment. It was this last feature of the El Quasar that made the Israelis nervous. See, I mentioned before that the nearby town of El Quasar was under bombardment. Any logical person should now be able to put 2 and 2 together, and with said conclusion find that the Liberty, or as Israel so unfortunately and mistakenly identified, the El Quasar, was bombing El Arish. This led to the quick ordering of an attack on the Liberty. The 2 Mirage 3s were ordered to basically confirm the threat, shall I say. They completed several identification passes, shooting literally nothing. Now, if you were one of those Mirage 3s, the obvious lack of identification markings and weapons would lead you to believe that this ship was some civilian vessel, and thus an inappropriate candidate for attack. And that's where you'd be wrong. War crimes are, after all, a wartime tradition. The aforementioned 2 Mirage 3s performed several strafing runs on the USS Liberty soon thereafter. Captain McGonigal was on the starboard wing of the bridge when he noticed the 2 Mirage 3s starting their strafing runs. Summoning a Lieutenant Painter, McGonigal ordered that the ship's gun station on the ship be manned. Lieutenant Painter hastened to comply with the orders he had received, but unfortunately it was too late, and the Mirage 3s fired their cannons, causing mass panic and chaos on the Liberty. The Mirage 3s made 3 further strafing runs, tearing the Liberty apart. Captain McGonigal and the Liberty's crew fought bravely to defend the ship, but to no avail. When finished with their 3 strafing runs, the Israeli Mirage 3s backed off to allow a pair of super mysteries armed with napalm to strafe the ship. Fortunately, only one of the canisters of war crime juice successfully hit the Liberty. With the Liberty burning and listing heavily to one side, the Mirage 3s as well as the 2 super mysteries were ordered to disengage, as one of the Mirage 3s had made another identification run. Because apparently, Israel runs by a shoot first, ID the thing later policy. And to the Israelis' horror, the ship had the words GTR-5 on its side. What they got from a GTR-5, I don't know, as that's the Liberty's designation, or part of it. The Liberty's full designation being a GTR-5. Shortly after this, a group of 3 small Israeli torpedo boats approached the Liberty, and did their own ID run. They were told the ship they were attacking was a destroyer, but instead found what appeared to be the smoking wreck of a merchant ship that was shooting at them. Now, if you were being shot at by a clearly, if not already, sinking merchant ship, would you A, run away, or B, shoot back? I'm gonna guess you said B because that's what the Israelis decided was the best option. They made 1 run on the Liberty, missing all but 1 shot that hit the stern of the Liberty. Eventually, though, they did stop firing on the Liberty after they'd finally ID'd the ship as the USS Liberty, an American ship. Helicopters from the USS America would arrive several hours after the attack to take the casualties. A cover-up was no doubt being organized by the US government. The Liberty was put under tow and would eventually be towed back to the US, and the attack left 34 people dead and over 100 more injured. Some people were given medals, and eventually the Liberty itself was scrapped, but at some point the incident would fade from people's memories. We would soon forget when one of America's trusted allies attacked one of our ships. The fact of whether Israel intended to attack the Liberty, if the attack itself was in fact deliberate, has been disputed and argued over ever since the attack itself. Several presidents have accepted the story relayed by Israel about the misidentification of the Liberty. Nonetheless, we must ask, did Israel intentionally attack the USS Liberty? There's certainly a reason for this one that's not hard to see, but with potentially diabolical consequences. That being that Israel intentionally attacked the USS Liberty, hoping that they might disguise themselves as Arab forces, and perhaps force America's hand, and thus American intervention. It would almost definitely bring a quick end to Israel's war, but might cause World War III if the USSR got involved as well. This theory, while slightly possible, is more than likely not the reason for Israel's attack. Israel made no attempt to hide the fact that the planes and boats attacking the Liberty were of Israeli origin. Okay, if we ask nicely, the CIA might tell us. No, of course it wasn't the CIA. Trust me, the CIA has no reason whatsoever to do a false flag on their own spy ship, spying on their ally in the middle of a war they don't want to be involved in. So what does this leave us with? Well, it leaves us with Israel's story, a story involving a military mess-up that might cost Israel not only the war, but its own independence. In another universe, this could have happened. However, I doubt the US would invade Israel. I mentioned before that the story that Israel says is true has been accepted by every president since 1967. Now, say what you will about the president or presidents of the past and or future, but the fact is that they know more about the world we live in than you and I, so let's just accept their judgment on this specific matter. Okay, so accepting that this is a complete accident, as Israel did not intentionally attack the Liberty, who gets the blame here? Well, it's not going to be the Liberty's crew. They couldn't do anything about it because, as I mentioned earlier, 450 cals are completely useless against planes and boats. I mean, unless you're lucky, but they weren't, so disregarding that, the Liberty's crew could do nothing to change their fate, and fought bravely to defend their ship and just survive. Commander McGonagall even issuing orders and still fighting to keep his ship afloat after he had been injured. So the blame must go on Israel, but why? Well, during this particular instance, Israel channeled its inner Russia and revealed the deep and inner flaws located throughout the IDF. I'm going to go after the person who decided that having a protocol that would result in the removing of a US ship off of a war map was a great idea. The pilots of the Mirages and Super Mysteries have no part in this, they were simply following orders. Nor did the crews of the torpedo boats. No, this is an issue with the higher-ups. See, removing the Liberty off of any map and essentially throwing it out to be found again later is quite possibly the worst decision made in this entire story. Israel having such a protocol is a breach of situational awareness and resulted in the very situation they find themselves in. This is literally the equivalent of some US general finding some British troops or something, then deciding they aren't worth knowing where they are, and deciding that he'll just forget about them. And then like 30 minutes later, he finds them again and thinks they're hostile, so he orders an F-35 to blow them up. Regardless of what you believe, whether that's Israel's story or some cock and ball story, including some aliens, a secret government agency no one's ever heard of, and who knows what else. We will never know the full story behind this because some things just remain secret and aren't recorded. So yes, it could have been an accident, but it also could have been intentional. We will never really know because that's, to put it simply, the way history works.